Hi, welcome back to the Mandarin Blueprint Podcast, episode 144. So, we've had some fantastic emails this week, and I kind of just want to jump straight into them. I don't really have any other updates for you at the moment. For those that are brand new to this podcast, this is your first episode. What this is essentially our way, primarily it's our way of connecting with our members that are on our course, the Mandarin Blueprint Method. So any sort of comments that come in over the week that we think other people would definitely benefit from hearing, we would put it in the podcast. And it's also just a way of connecting with those people personally, because Phil and I run the course just ourselves. We don't have so much time. So this is a way of us sort of maintaining that personal connection. And also, as a sort of byproduct, it does create great material for the course itself. So if you're on the course, it's not only the best way to learn Chinese in existence, it's also a way to kind of become part of a living curriculum. That's essentially what we're doing here. So I'd like to start this week with a very, very interesting email exchange I had with someone that would like to remain anonymous, but someone who is, let's say, has been learning Chinese for a little while. I'd say with us probably a few months, but she's had some experience learning Chinese prior to that. And she got in touch with me about a week ago asking a question about speaking. The subject of the email was shadowing versus free speech. So rather than explain, I'm just going to delve into the email and I'll talk to you about my response to it. I think a lot of people find this useful because I know personally I've had this same problem when I was learning, and I know a lot of other people do too. So, hi Luke and Phil, I'm just getting started with speaking. I was not going to yet, but I happened to notice someone on a language app who was isolating in a hotel, and I thought, yay, here's someone who cannot escape saying he's busy. I'll see if he can help correct my writing. Just a quick thing here. With speaking, I know it's a common thing with learning languages to delve into speaking immediately. We don't necessarily suggest that. I think you should start speaking practice whenever you're personally comfortable with, whether that's day 1 or day 300. But really, we believe that you don't really get the full benefits of speaking practice until you have a foundation of listening and reading to build upon. Because speaking, the way it works is it's largely about activating passive vocabulary that you already have. So you have to do it separately. You can't just read Chinese for a year without any speaking practice and then suddenly be fluent. You have to practice speaking, of course. But at the same time, you can't really do much speaking without input, comprehensible input, because how can you produce something when you haven't heard it before? Just like we do with our native language. So it's the most natural way of learning language, and essentially in any realm, when you conform to nature, it's always the best way to go. Otherwise, you're just fighting against what naturally comes to you, right? So our course is all about teaching you how to read and understand Mandarin and feeding you Mandarin that you can understand of increasing complexity, only when you're ready, of course, to have a full understanding or almost full understanding of what's going on. So you can connect to the material and create passive understanding of the language, and then you go and write and you go and speak in your own time and you activate that vocabulary. So this person has just started with that process, started sort of delving into it, and she continues. It turned out he did not want to write at all, just speak. So we started talking. Very, very simple language on the level of where are you from and what is the weather like in Beijing today. It's been great fun, although he needs to repeat every short sentence 2 or 3 times slowly, very slowly, before I maybe get what he's saying. It takes me even longer to say anything myself, but he's locked inside a hotel room, so he has time and therefore infinite patience. And I decide to take the opportunity to speak daily for these 2 weeks. Luckily, his Spanish is not that much better than my Chinese, so I have done my share of repeating and speaking very slowly in return. I'm a bit obsessed with pronunciation. I think that I can do okay on pronouncing single syllables and tone pairs, maybe not great. Problem initials are still hard. Problem initials are those sounds that don't exist in English. 支持是日 and 机器西 and 字词思. So we call them problem initials at Mandarin Blueprint. But when I repeat after another person, whether it's shadowing sentences online or speaking to someone, I think I'm mostly understandable. That's the most important thing for me now. Although in the long run, I do hope to get much better than just understandable. That's a good goal to have, yeah, for sure. But speaking freely, it's a totally different thing. I find there is a huge gap in my level of trying to pronounce a sentence freely to shadowing them. Of course, yeah. So much so that I don't really understand why. I mean, I guess it's normal, but still, if I can say things more or less correctly, then shadowing, I must have somehow understood how to use my facial muscles to produce those sounds. It's less of a physical problem with your muscles, it's more of a mental thing in terms of activating that vocabulary. But we'll get into that in a minute. But when the model audio is not there, it's as if my face just cannot make those sounds and something totally different comes out. I don't know if it's because I may be trying to speak too early or too fast. It feels like there must be some switch to flick in my brain to apply the shadowing mode into free speech, but I'm just totally in the dark as to where that switch is. Why does it feel so different? They say it's good to have a silent period in the beginning. That was inspired. That's something that I personally learned from Steve Kaufman, who's a serial language learner, polyglot, and creator of lingq.com, link. And that's something that he suggests. And it calms a lot of people down, saying you can just not speak for several months, as long as you like, really, when you're first getting into a language. First get used to it, understand it, and then speak when you're comfortable. And I pretty much agree with that. Again, as long as that's what you want to do, you feel comfortable with. But I've been listening to Chinese online only daily for almost 2 years. Most of it has not been comprehensible to me. And I do notice that listening to the MB sentences seems to help much more than other more difficult material. Yeah, so there's a couple of things here. Where is that switch between shadowing and free speech? Well, we'll address this one first about the listening. The key is comprehensible input. So if you're just listening to stuff, you don't speak Japanese, and you just put on a Japanese TV show or just TV and you start flicking around, you are not going to learn the language. Or if you do learn it, it's going to be incredibly inefficient because 100% or 99% of everything you do not understand, and there'll be certain things you get through context of the visuals, which will help a lot. But it's just such a terrible way to go in terms of learning a language. You need to start small with the very basics. Again, just like you did with your native language. You learn mama, baba, dad, mum, whatever your native language was, and then you gradually went to other words, basic vocabulary, and then phrases eventually after like a year and a half. It doesn't have to be that slow, by the way, but you get the point. You can't just delve into reading Charlotte's Web when you don't understand mama or dad, And of course, I'm being extreme to make a point. Of course, you weren't trying to read Charlotte's Web in Chinese or anything else, but you get the point. It's got to be at your level, which is why learning Chinese is so darn difficult, because how do you start reading and listening? How do you get to that point from 0 to 1? And that's what we help you with. And yes, we feed you content that you can understand at every level, from the very, very basic level to the intermediate to the more advanced. You always understand at least 90%, preferably 98% of what you're looking at and listening to. And the other 2 to 10% is merely to give you that, to spur you on to continue learning. The I+1 theory from Stephen Krashen. So yeah, you're going to, so basically a lot of that listening practice, if you didn't really understand it, it's mostly a waste. It's not completely a waste, of course not, because you're still getting the language, you're getting used to it in certain ways, but if you're not really understanding the message of what's being said, even partially, it's not really worth your time. It's a waste of time. So that is why you spent 2 years and not really made that much progress with it. What to do and how to bridge that gap between shadowing and speaking freely. Should I stay silent a bit longer to avoid developing bad pronunciation habits? Just listen to more comprehensible stuff like MB stories and sentences. Should I just shadow more? Study the pronunciation mastery course again, keep speaking, but make sure to keep it on my level and just repeat a conversation. Supposing I find people patient enough to do that for me. Yes, that's the one. All the other stuff, not really. Yes, that final point. Where is that switch? I know it has to be there in my brain somewhere. If I can shadow, why can't I speak? 这很麻烦. This is troublesome, difficult. I feel very frustrated and also very excited and happy at the same time. Really looking forward to getting to a point where I can actually speak Chinese to communicate with people. Kind regards and thank you. So, of course, I responded, and basically the first thing I said to this person was, if you're being honest with yourself, how many hours, not how many lessons have you had? I had a 45-minute lesson, and therefore I've practiced speaking for 45 minutes. No. You probably spoke, literally the speaking time for you was probably 10, 15, 20, less than half of that. So tell me exactly, or roughly as exact as you can, how much time have you spent freely speaking Chinese since you started studying? Be honest, really think about it. Again, don't be like, well, I've spent 1 hour a week with a tutor for 6 weeks, so that's 6 hours of speaking. No, it's more likely 1 hour or probably less. So that was the main question I asked, and I said, what you focus on grows, and that's again true in all sorts of realms of life. When it comes to language learning, what you focus on grows. And if you want to get better at speaking, you have to freely. You have to speak freely. Shadowing is fantastic. Reading and listening, reading out loud. Shadowing is basically, if you're not sure, listener, what that is, it's when you listen to audio and you try and repeat what you hear at the same time, or as close to the same time as you can. And also read is great. If you can do all those three things at the same time, you'll improve your pronunciation, your reading, your listening, all simultaneously. But guess what? If you're just riding your bike with training wheels on all the time, when you take those training wheels off, you're still going to fall on the floor, right? Because you need to practice without training wheels. So anyway, this person got back to me with this reply. Hahaha. My total hours of speaking Chinese, really easy to count, maybe 6 in total. 3 of them way too early, a year ago, an hour a month ago, and maybe a total of 2 hours over the past 10 days. And I was like, yes, I knew it. I do realize I'm being a little impatient here, LOL. This person is not a bad teacher though. He's a Beihai English major. I guess that'd be a big university in Beijing. Professional interpreter and seriously studying his second foreign language, close to my age, most in Hello Talker, around 25 at the most, and seems willing to help. I help him a lot too, and he's not there to flirt. So yeah, a lot of people use these apps as dating apps. You've got to watch out for that. So far, I've been doing a lot of character learning, reviewing in Anki, flashcards, maintaining my pre-MB characters on Scritter. Scritter is a great app too. Reading, writing simple things on Hello Talk and reading answers there that are way beyond my level. Again, try and keep it to your level. That's a very important thing. My challenge is to have patience to stay on the comprehensible level in input and not to try to say too difficult things when writing or speaking. Although I find that in general people understand me even if it's a try, even if I try to write things above my level. But if they don't correct me, there's a risk in that. That she's referring to here is making mistakes that go uncorrected repeatedly, leads to bad habits which are hard to break and end up just affecting your language long term. So You want to basically, when you're writing or speaking, you want to try mainly to stick to something that you understand and that you know how to say correctly. And if you don't, you ask a question or you look it up first and then you say it. And it's fine to make mistakes, but as long as you're confident the person will correct you. So usually I get a paid tutor to do that, and I explicitly tell them, I want you to be strict with me and correct every mistake I make in detail. All of my Hello Talk friends are language majors. I write regularly with 4 to 5 people, trying to do a little bit every day. Plus, there's a mother in Finland, the only one who's not a language major, who reads little Chengyu stories. So Chengyu are Chinese idioms that are very, very old and connected to ancient stories and things like that. They are always 4 characters long, and they, more often than not, have a very interesting story behind them. Who reads little Chengyu stories to her 2-year-old daughter, and they read them to me together. That's adorable. I don't try to understand them or memorize them. I just try to transcribe the pinyin. That's hard. And repeat. When I send my audio, I get comments on pronunciation and explanation of the meaning of the Chengyu. Listening to the tiny learner and her mother, who sounds quite like a sergeant, pronouncing clearly and loudly for the kid, is a nice way to practice. I know, we shouldn't do kid stuff, but there is a human connection in this. I know her kids are having a bit of a hard time in Finnish daycare and maybe feel good about listening to a Finn trying to learn their language, and I thought it was nice that this just happened unplanned. Well, first of all, I never, nor Phil would ever say, don't listen to kids stuff. What we do sometimes say is that kids stuff is often a little bit more difficult and less relevant to natural everyday Chinese than you would normally expect. Often because kids are mostly fluent in Chinese anyway, so kids' books are usually there to teach them the more complicated stuff for their level, like Chengyu, for example. That's all. But in your specific situation, I wouldn't personally bother with Chengyu right now and stories and things like that, even if they're really fun, because you need to focus on things at your level for efficiency, for the sake of efficiency. If that's what you want speed, and you want efficiency, you need to focus on things at your level. But I'm never against, I wouldn't say don't look at kids stuff, because I'm all about enjoying yourself as well. So if you want to enjoy yourself and you enjoy doing what that is, then do it. So I thought speaking a weird small language like Finnish was a huge handicap for any language exchange, but not at all. People who want to learn Finnish are generally very interested in languages, maybe not all, but I've been out there on Hello Talk, for 7 months, picking out the best through actively helping them to keep them motivated to chat with me. That's such a great idea, and that's how you maintain good language partners. It takes effort, consistent effort, just like any relationship. Where if you just pay for a tutor, then you don't have to worry about all that. But of course, you have to pay for it. In any case, I've had now my fun trying to go above my level lately and start communicating. I think now is the time to come back to my real level again and stay there for a while before I venture out too far into Hello Talk land. Yeah, and this is why children learn faster. This is why adults learn slower. It's not because we're worse at learning languages. Quite the opposite, actually. We have the mental capacity to learn languages faster using, say, a method like ours. But unfortunately, adults have a bunch of other issues like this, which I've also been very guilty of, which is I want to say this. I want this. Ego comes into it. It's essentially ego. It's pride, and I want to speak, be at this level, or impatience, whereas a kid doesn't think like that. A kid just goes, I want to say this thing, so I can play with this kid. Oh, what's that? What is this? And they'll just ask. They don't have these sorts of, I guess you could say, emotional baggage, or just all sorts of stuff that comes with being an adult, and that causes all sorts of things that slow us down in the long run. Basically, if you just 顺其自然, if you just go with nature, and try not to think about the process too much and overanalyze, go at your level, and just speak every day, speak about everyday topics, try and say everyday things, say what comes to mind, you'll have a much better time. So thank you. She says, thank you for everything. I'm here and studying every day, even if you haven't heard from me much lately. So that's great. And then we, just as I was preparing the podcast today, she responded again. And she says, hi, Luke and Phil. I just have to share with you some feedback from yet another new Hello Talk friend of mine. I had a big laugh with this today. We have been chatting in a happy mix of very simple Chinese, beginner level, hello, how are you? Awesome. Finnish and some English for 2 days. And this time I have done my best to keep things simple and not go above the level of what I actually can do so that my Chinese would sound like Chinese and not just a bunch of barely comprehensible things put together without much order. Oh my God, it's like, this is just great figuring this out. And also, again, this sounds like me. This is exactly what I would try to do. And it slowed me down so much. Just overcomplicating things, trying to sound smart when I didn't have even a basic vocabulary yet or a grasp of grammar and stuff like this. Yeah, anyway, I'm glad you turned things around. So this is a little snapshot of her conversation with her tutor. So 我, that's me. So that's her. She says, 我觉得我们可以一起学习简单的句子，练习发音, which is a really well done sentence, which basically says, I think we could study simple sentences together and practice pronunciation. Or drill pronunciation. And then the 朋友, the friend, says, your Chinese doesn't have any grammatical problems. How did you do that? It's amazing. And she says, it's called comprehensible input, my online Chinese course. This sounds like we've written this whole series of emails now, isn't it? It's like making it into a sneaky advertisement. But this is what she said. My online Chinese course teaches with that method, the mandarinblueprint.com. Those guys are my language learning heroes. And then the friend says, wow, then they really are heroes. Your Chinese is spy level. Spy level. So thank you, Luke and Phil, my language learning heroes, for taking me to spy level Chinese by the end of the foundation course. I don't know what that means exactly. Like maybe spy level, like 间谍水平, 间谍 level. I just know that sounds awesome, spy level. Maybe it's like a translation from a popular Chinese internet slang or something like that the kids use these days. But either way, we all know what that means. That means awesome Chinese. The end of the foundation course, by the way, is the end of phase 5, level 36. I'm just finishing the last final touches of level 36, so you can officially rename the course Spy Level now if you wish, LOL. My Chinese is, of course, still very basic, but I'm having so much fun with this, and you have made me feel easy all the way. 谢谢你们, which means thank you. So that's just great. I was so happy. It put a big smile on my face to read this. When someone's having an issue and they figure it out like this in such an amazing way. And this is what's called a breakthrough. And it's a great feeling, and it happens a handful of times over your journey, maybe like 5-10 times. You feel like these huge surges in your level. You're like, whoa, I can do this now, and I could not do this yesterday or a month ago or whatever. And it feels just euphoric. It's great. And she's still got so far to go. She's the foundation course is just that. It's foundation. She's laid the foundation, a solid foundation, because that's how we structured the course, slowly and steadily at first, and then gradually increasing exponentially in speed and progress. But she can read, she can write, she can listen, she can now speak as well. She's starting to. And that's just with a few extra hours of speaking practice put in. It makes so much difference, guys. So I think this is inspiring. I think you should get out there as well. If you're listening, if you're on the course or not, I think you should start getting a language exchange partner and start putting in those hours or minutes speaking each week, whether that's with a paid or a free tutor. And you will see after just a few hours, not even like a month, like even days, you'll notice a difference. If you just relax, have fun, and don't try to go above your level too much, and just and stay stay humble, and just and and just try and imagine it. Just be like a kid, just be like a kid. So thank you very much to this person. It was awesome, and I look forward to hearing updates in the future. So next is Sorcha. It's a new member of ours. Just said hello in the community. My name is Sorcha, and I purchased the course a while ago, but wasn't ready. I didn't have a fire under my why, and my self-confidence was beyond lacking. It was non-existent. Things are different now. I've been listening to the podcast, highly recommended for newbies, and getting an overall feel for the MB way, the Mandarin Blueprint way. And the case studies are massively inspiring. Yes, I agree. Please go check those out on YouTube and our podcast on our website. I've reached a tipping point of sorts where I just knew that I was in the right frame of mind to give it a red-hot go and do the work that this course would require if I wanted to be successful, which I do. I live in Australia, and we have a number of mainstream programs that are in Chinese now, news, Dateline, etc., as well as a number of TV shows, etc. So this language is definitely on the move here. We also have a channel dedicated to international broadcasting, and Chinese movies in Cantonese or Mandarin and TV are easy to find. That's good, yes. Chinese TV and movies are a great resource of input. I regularly watch a dating show called If You Are the One. Is that Fei Cheng Wu Rao? I'm not sure. Which is a cultural mind blower. Haha. With movies, I enjoy heartwarmers and comedy as opposed to action and war with flying warriors, although I'll watch them too. Last week I saw The Nightingale, which I loved. The other night I watched Lucky Grandma, which I found hilarious. I'll be watching that one again. The main character reminded me of a neighbour I once had. I have a time frame, materials, got my head around Anki, and I'm organised, so here I go. Hi, everybody. Yeah, well done, Sorcha. And it's so good that you're interested in Chinese films and TV. I paichied them up for a long time. Paichi is like sort of look down upon them, sort of cut them out of like a possibility of using, because I was like, Chinese movies are so silly, or Chinese TV shows, they're so badly written. But actually, once you get into them, they're really good. Even the newer ones, like there's a lot of rubbish movies, but I think it seems like everyone's making rubbish movies these days anyway. That's besides the point. They could be really hilarious, especially the ones like pre-2000. Chinese movies in the 90s, 80s, and the 2000s as well, like early 2000s, are just some of them. They've got tons of great ones. Lots of silly comedies, like you say. So if you enjoy them, and if you feel like you don't enjoy them, give them a chance. Just give a few a chance. They're a great opportunity, not only to learn the language, but also to understand the cultural aspects, which are also incredibly important. So welcome, Sorcha, and now looks like you're full steam ahead. I expect to hear back from you within a month or two, and I'd like to hear back from you to hear an update on your progress. Next is George from the community. There's another introduction for us. So George says, "Hi everyone, I'm just in the early stages of the pronunciation course. I had also started the character course, but found the movie making bit a bit daunting. Yes, that it can be at first, because it's the idea of we're asking you to use a part of your brain that you maybe haven't used very much since you were a kid. For a lot of people anyway, this is the case. And essentially learning a new skill to learn a new skill. So it's not just, okay, we're going to start teaching you Chinese now. No, we lay the foundation. So we say, okay, we're going to teach you this skill, which is a skill that memory athletes use to memorize ridiculous amounts of information easily, which a lot of people are like, whoa, I just want to learn Chinese. Why are you making me learn this memory athlete? This sounds really something only really smart people could do, or some people that are really creative. And it's absolute nonsense. It's actually really easy. It's just a step-by-step process that anyone can learn. Even with people that have aphantasia, that can't actually visualize things very well or at all, they still can do this method using other senses. So everyone can do it. But I completely understand. We've had this since day one, since 5 years ago when we were teaching this live in Chengdu. We'd always get these people, maybe about 10, 20, 30% max of people that would just be like, it's not for me, sorry, I'm not this kind of person. But after we sit them down and walk them through the process and they make a movie, they realize how simple it is. it all becomes clear. But completely understand your feeling there, George. For now, I'll concentrate on the pronunciation, although using that to familiarize myself with Anki. Yes, and that's another thing that you need to learn at the moment with the course. But this is something that will be changing very soon. Very soon is as soon as we can. We're going to be beta testing a new flashcard software, a new flashcard app. And again, if you'd like to beta test, just send us an email, contact@mandarinblueprint.com. So, Anki, memory palaces, all this stuff, it can be intimidating. But it's all worth it in the end, trust me. It's not even that long. It's like a few hours of figuring stuff out. And then once you've figured it out, you're equipped to progress. I don't know how many times faster, but a lot faster than the average learner. So George continues. He says, I've been studying Mandarin for just over 3 years now, but found I just seem to be going round in circles at the beginner elementary level, doing one course after another, but never feeling confident enough to move on. While looking for materials and tips to help me improve pronunciation, I came across Mandarin Blueprint via the shadowing technique video on YouTube. My interest was triggered, and here I am. My reason for learning Chinese is that I love all things language, and I like a challenge. I already speak reasonable but rusty French, and I'm fluent in Indonesian. Chinese was always on my language bucket list, but I guessed it would not be easy, and so I never got round to it. Now I'm retired and have time that needs to be filled and a brain that needs to be exercised. I started 3.5 years ago with the Open University's first year Chinese program and then continued on my own. At that time, I had vaguely imagined a structured system that might have guided my journey, but never really managed to work it out. So when I came across Mandarin Blueprint, I recognized the sort of system I had dimly imagined before. This is such a common story. When we do our case studies or interviews with our members, so often it's this story. I tried to learn Chinese for 3 months or a year or 3 years or even 10 years. And then I stumbled across this method. A lot of people also say, I know there's a better way out there. There's got to be a better way. So I'm maybe going to try and figure out on my own, which is exactly what Phil and I did. That's exactly what, that was what led to the birth of Mandarin Blueprint, is us just being like, there's got to be a better way. I think we can figure out a better way. And we actually had the time and the inclination to do it, unlike most people, right? So here we are. Continues, I spend a lot of time on passive input, i.e. watching Chinese films and dramas without any explicit study involved, and also use dual Chinese, the chairman's bow, and other graded readers, in addition to whatever study program I am actually following. Most recently is Chinese for Us. I believe that's another very detailed Chinese course, similar to sort of in the same vein as Mandarin Blueprint or Yo-Yo Chinese. And I've heard great stuff about them. My experience so far with pronunciation is that it seems to be working. I think where you win out is that most courses focus on the presentation of language, but fall short by not providing adequate practice opportunities. Your use of flashcards in Anki provides that. I'm cautiously confident about my success at this time. I'm really excited for you, George. And yet cautiously confident is it's a very smart thing to say. Because again, when you've been failed so many times by other resources, been disappointed over and over again, why would you think that this one's going to work? It is. So, congratulations, you found the one that actually works. I'm not boasting. I'm just basing that on hundreds of reviews and case studies that we've had, and it just works. And again, you will need, if you want to get good at speaking, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, you will need to practice speaking on its own, but you don't have to worry about that right now. And of course, writing and things like that. Just make your way through the foundation course. Do not be scared of the memory palace technique. Like I said, anyone can do it. And we baby step you through the whole thing. And what makes it really easy, what cinches it, is the comments from all the other members, just such detailed movies, which I'll go into some in just a moment. Comments just to help you along. Of course, to keep these podcasts, and of course, our email. We're available by email every single day. So if you ever run into any issues, we'll be there for you. So yeah, I'm excited for you, and keep in touch. Keep us updated. Next is Keith Travis. Oh, this is a very interesting couple of emails here. These were just comments, actually, detailed comments on the platform itself. This is always good to hear from people that have really made it through a chunk of the course and are sort of giving their findings. And this sort of feedback for anyone else listening that's on the course, this is absolute gold for us. Any feedback is gold, but this specific, where it's like very specific, and I can now do this now that I've made it to this level. Anyway, let's get into it, and you'll see what I mean. So Keith says, hello teachers, halfway through the phase 3, which is actually very early in the course, by the way. Phase 3 is level 13 to 21, I believe. And there are 57 levels. And those levels get much bigger later. So this is like, I don't know, a fifth of the way through the course, maybe, in terms of the content, maybe not even that. So halfway through phase 3, and a few observations that are jumping out, some of which may be inadvertent results of the way I'm approaching your material. I believe I've been spending quite a bit more time doing character writing in the way of compiling great stacks and lists consolidated from your various flashcard and website sections. And for context, as a professional test prep instructor, I'm trying to see some good and bad in how I or my mind seems to be reconciling the material. So number 1, I have recently begun reviewing HSK practice tests to sort of gauge my progress as a positive side effect of your course. I'm pleased to inform you that although prior to the beginning phase 3, even HSK1 seemed to be a bit of a guessing gander. By about level 14, I could crush both reading and listening with full confidence and could stumble my way to a pass on HSK2. That's the sort of feedback that I'm talking about. See, we don't know that until you tell us. So this is just fantastic. Just one level later, I began to realize that I could almost instantly tell upon looking at a sentence whether or not I would be able to read it and whether or not any or all of the words were already given exposure to this point in the Mandarin Blueprint Method, and I had yet but to reinforce them. This is an interesting effect. It resembles test prep strategies, for it helps to save time and prioritize how to skip around questions. It also seems to be a side effect of my having committed to writing out pretty much every sentence prior to phase 2. That is quite a commitment. Well done. And more or less fully writing every character example from all MB sources upon first, second, even third sightings, and so on. I can also readily translate most sentences directly to English with little trouble. That's fantastic. Although I am still extremely sluggish when it comes to managing a full spoken verbalization. Again, of course, that takes separate practice, and you shouldn't expect yourself to be able to do that yet. Not very well anyway. I expect this is what stands to improve with the incoming concentration on sentences, and then again in phase 4, working on greater celerity. I don't know what celerity means. Number 2, a day prior to writing this, I realized I was able to successfully negotiate a pass on HSK3 reading and writing. Well done. That's fantastic. And that HSK4 was already very much just around the corner so far as reading and writing go. Having scanned ahead to see how the tests at HSK5 and 6 levels look, nothing seems at all in excess of the lengths of the graded reading materials you have set out for phase 4 and 5. No, they're not. They're rather short articles. The thing that's challenging about the later levels, HSK6, is and things like that, and HSK5, is the speed at which you need to read. You need to read them and understand them, and be able to sort of explain the points that were made throughout the article. That's where the challenge lies. So point 3. And all this brings me to reflect on the guarantee, which I believe I remember reading on your website at some point or other, to the effect of a guaranteed HSK4 pass. Well, certainly, a person is practically there already simply by mastering the material through the end of phase 3, it would seem. However, this mastery, quote unquote, would seem to also require a bit more devotion to the many of the top-down words, grammar points, and word structure bits, so as to come as close to the same vocabulary as tested upon in HSK4. I've not done a detailed comparison, but I already know that the vocabulary given exposure so far mostly exceeds the current, if not the soon-to-be, HSK3 Level 4 requirements. Indeed, I can see that by the end of the intermediate course, the HSK5 reading and writing should be no struggle. It remains again that my listening skills are able to come up to par. Yeah, so we are way ahead of the game with the new HSK update. So essentially, there's now 9 levels of HSK, right? And so they've added 3 levels. But there's now over 11,500 words in total, and around, I'm not sure how many characters, I can't remember, but probably well over 2,000, maybe 3,000 characters. I don't know, but a ton more content. So the way that we're now rejiggering the site, the platform, and with the expansions that are coming up, hopefully soon. When you finish the intermediate course, we will guarantee that we'll cover everything in the new HSK 1 to 3. So you'll definitely be able to pass the HSK 1 to 3. At least for what I'm getting from what Keith is saying here is that, yeah, we said, how do we put this? So like, just because we cover all the vocabulary, I think that you can actually pass the HSK3 before you cover all the vocabulary, I guess is my point. So maybe even after the foundation or before you finish the foundation, you'll be able to pass the HSK3, because it's not like it's just a list of vocabulary and they test you on the definition of each word. It's a general understanding of the language, mainly for reading and writing and listening, no speaking. So you'll probably be able to pass the new HSK way before you finish the intermediate course, which is the currently the end of our entire curriculum. But once we expand it, the upper intermediate course is going to cover HSKs 4 to 6 as well, so 1 to 6. So you'll definitely be able to pass the new HSK 6, and then the advanced course will cover everything all the way up to 9. So you'll definitely be able to pass the 9. But again, even maybe you could pass the advanced course after the intermediate. Maybe you could pass the HSK 9 just after the intermediate course. We don't know. We'd like to hear from you guys. So, HSK, sometimes we don't say very nice things about it because it deserves criticism. It's not the ideal way. It's not the way they select their words and things like that. But it is a great benchmark. It's a great target for everyone learning Chinese to have, because it's internationally recognized, and it generally does demand a certain level of skill from you. So just a little side note there regarding our course in the HSK levels. So finally, number 4, these things being the case, that my progress is good enough. Progress is good, although it seems to me quite shifted away from the mainline intentions of your recommendations. Would you generally or strongly recommend that I greatly reduce the sorts of extracurricular bits and focus more on plowing through the levels as you've set them up? Or do you think it might be better if, after finishing the initial reviews through to the rest of phase 3, just to chill and put off moving to phase 4 until after having more or less thoroughly digested all of the phase 3 materials as it cycles through Anki with me? Thank you much for this and your previous swift and helpful replies. Yeah, so basically all I said to Keith was, when it comes to this kind of question, how should I approach the course? It's kind of the same way we approach the course itself, the actual memory techniques within the course. It's like, follow these basic guidelines, select your actor, try and imagine things visually. We give you basic guidelines, but really we're kind of like, just play it your way. And that attitude over the last 2 years that we've instilled into you guys has led to a lot of innovations in the course from you. And because we've just been so flexible with the rules of how to approach everything. So I don't like to be too dogmatic with saying, you should definitely do this. Because at the end of the day, everyone's different. And one of the most important factors, as I often mention, is are you enjoying yourself? Are you having fun? So basically, is what I said to Keith. I just said, would you enjoy chilling for a few weeks and doing that? Or would you also enjoy plowing through? Because if it's both, I would go for plowing through because it's faster, you make more progress. As for extracurricular activities, writing out sentences, it's not necessary. It's not necessary. It is extracurricular, but do you enjoy it? Do you get excited to do it for half an hour, like writing out sentences? If the answer is yes, then do it. If the answer is kind of, but I feel like I'd rather just make progress with the course faster, then do that. If you're like, no, I hate doing it, but I feel like I need to, then definitely don't do it. Okay. So it's kind of that's often the overarching factor. As long as you're following the general guidelines, you're following our instructions as you go through the course, fill your boots, take it as fast or as slow as you like, and do as many extracurricular activities you like. There are some people that like to shadow every single sentence, sometimes several times, every time they review their flashcards, and they like to do that. But I definitely wouldn't recommend that. I wouldn't go out of my way to say, hey guys, make sure you spend an extra half an hour a day and doing these extra things that you don't 100% need to. Of course not. But they do have great effects overall, so as well. But so yeah, that's my answer to that. So then Keith responded, thank you for the suggestion and encouragement. By your use of the word plough, spelled P-L-O-U-G-H, instead of my use of the word plough, P-L-O-W, I'm guessing that you are Luke. Yes, I am. I look forward to the next podcast then, because I said I would share it. It will, a week from now, I assume, as the one just put out, focused on a fellow learning Chinese as a fourth language. Yeah, that was just a case study. Yeah, that's very impressive, wasn't it? Just a quick update. This is great. I was able to pass the HSK2 yesterday. So previously Keith was just doing practice tests, but now he's passed the actual HSK2 with excellent reading and a 29 out of 35 on listening. That's just fantastic. The Anki sentences for phase 3 are just starting to come in thick now. Yes, they get faster and faster. But once you get used to them, they sort of peter out, level off, plateau. So as you get used to the amount, and Anki, the algorithm sort of takes its time getting used to the amount too, you get used to it, levels off. So he continues, I've decided to split the difference between the two approaches and dedicate now through Sunday, June 13th, to consolidate and review notes for reinforcement and refine my hands and moving stories and elements before moving ahead full steam through phase 4. I'll attempt HSK3 as a final bonus before starting phase 4 this Monday, posting my results in a brief post at the outset of the lessons. Thank you. I'm excited about phase 4 like a child waiting for Christmas. That's so good to hear. And I'm really excited like a child waiting for Christmas to hear your HSK results. So please keep us updated. Next is Scott Schneider by the community. He just asked a quick question, traditional versus simplified. When looking at Mandarin Companion, highly recommended, by the way, graded readers, very good books. We know Jared and John quite well. Great guys, great product. When looking at Mandarin Companion, other resources to buy, beginner books, some ask about traditional versus simplified characters. Taking MB, HSK, and other things into consideration, is there a way we should or need to go? If no option, does moving between the two cause major problems? This is kind of like it's a personal thing. Simplified is by far the most useful, just objectively, because so many more people use them. But I've been told, and I agree actually, I've been told by a lot of my Chinese friends over the years that traditional characters are really worth learning for various reasons. They are used by Hong Kong, for example, is very small. Cantonese is a very small place, but it's a very impactful place. It's a huge culture, even though it's just like a small geographical location. Of course, there's also Taiwan, Singapore, and stuff. And so many Mandarin learners. Again, Taiwan's a fantastic place. So many Mandarin learners just focus purely on traditional. You also It just opens up more doors in terms of more content you can consume. And of course, Hong Kong is opened up completely, whereas China is completely is very closed and censored. And sometimes, like for example, I'll give you one personal story that affected me by not understanding traditional characters. I still don't understand traditional characters, a lot of them. I wanted to really read One Punch Man in Chinese, but for the longest time they didn't have simplified Chinese version because they only had the Fantizi, the traditional version. Drove me crazy. I really wanted to read it in Chinese. They have it now, and I've smashed my way through the whole thing in like a few weeks. But that's just one example. But yeah, there's tons of content you're missing out on that if you don't know traditional. So if I could go back, I don't have the time or the inclination to do it right now because I'm just too busy. I have too little spare time. So I'm not going to go and learn 3,000 Chinese traditional characters, or however many, maybe like 1,200, 1,500 traditional characters right now. But if I could start all the way back from the beginning, I might learn traditional first, just get it done, and then learn simplified afterwards. Now, I wouldn't know how to, and people often ask us, why can't you just create a hands and movement method for traditional? It looks very easy, but it's actually very, very difficult because just the amount of components involved and the difference in components. This simplification process was in many ways not very intuitive, not very well done. So it's just tough. It's really tough. It would involve a complete overhaul of our method, again, for a relatively small market segment, like I guess from a business perspective, So it's kind of like the issue we're having with our advanced course times 100. So if someone was on our course and they were like crazy rich and he wanted to give us $500,000 or something like that, it's like, go and make the traditional version. We might do it, but it's just not something we're going to do for a while. Eventually, I'd love to, but not for a while. So yeah, that's my inclination with that. I think you definitely can. I recommend as like a Band-Aid solution, go and get Remembering the Traditional Hansa by James Heisig and Richardson. I forget his first name. Go and get that. 3,000 tradition. 3,000, I think it's 3,000 characters or whatever. Work your way through it. Apply our method to his character list, and just do that back and forth. That wouldn't be a problem. There should be a flashcard deck out there for Anki as well for that book. So that's my recommendation if you want to learn both. But yeah, I'd like to also point out it's not essential, but it's just something that I would like to have done myself. Next is Helen on this is a lesson, phase 1. The intro, the very beginning of phase 1, where you learn characters. She says, "Hi there, I would like to have recommendations on how to listen to Mandarin. It seems difficult to understand conversations. It's so fast to understand everything. Also, is it really important to speak with tones? Because I hear casual or formal conversations. I don't really hear the tones. Please and thank you." So it's similar to what I've been saying. We've said this many times, right? If you want to learn to speak better, you have free speaking practice. If you want to learn to write better, you have writing practice. If you want to learn to listen better, if you want to be able to listen rather, you have to listen a ton. So it's really that simple, but it's not quite that simple because it has to be listening done at your level. Right? It's comprehensible input. And you just do that for a while. As long as you can understand at least most of what's going on with your content, you listen as actively as you can. Sometimes you listen in the background, but just listen every day. Just have it on the background. Don't switch it off. Just turn it down, depending on who you live with and stuff, without bothering anyone. And just do that for 6 months. And of course, just work your way through our course, and you'll naturally get better at listening and reading. But I also recommend that as well as our course, on top of that, you do listen to our extra listening materials that we provide, like our sentence packs and things like that, and just have them on shuffle on your phone or whatever. And just do that. You do that for 6 months every day for say an hour. And with listening, you can do it for an hour. It's reasonable because you can just have it on as like a radio in the background. You will get better at listening. It's unconscious. and it's gradual, but you will notice you'll have a breakthrough with listening after a few weeks or months. And yes, it's really important to speak with tones. I know, especially when you hear people with different accents in Chinese, like people skip it, but it's kind of like how do we put this? It's kind of like how you see, like, oh, wait a minute, that expert professional piano player, he didn't play that arpeggio or whatever. I don't play piano, but I'm trying to think of an example where it's like, when you have professionals doing something, they're allowed to mess with the rules. You're not, okay? So when you have like native Chinese speakers, wait a minute, he got that tone wrong. No, he didn't. He's a native speaker, or he's a highly advanced, learner. So if he did that, you can be sure that he's allowed to do that, and it still sounds good. So I think that's a decent enough analogy for you to get that. So yeah, I hope that answers that question there, Helen. Next is Soren. Soren's very far into the course now, and he's probably finishing the intermediate course pretty soon. And every now and then he sends us a message like this. So we've got a sentence here. 他虽然只有6岁, even though he is only 6 years old, 但已经能认识很多汽车品牌的标志了. He can already recognize a bunch of 汽车品牌, like car brands, signs, like 标志. So like, really cool to read a relatively advanced sentence like this and feel it is super easy. Yeah, that's the kind of effect and of course with no pronunciation. No pinyin pronunciation help, no translation. Soren understands that entire sentence, and that's what you can do. Anyone can do that with enough effort and time invested into Mandarin Blueprint. Kris, Adrian on bonus are top 5 most difficult tone pairs. He just says, great video. I can make these sounds correctly slowly, but struggle to do it anything approaching normal conversational speed. I look forward to the day they start coming out a bit more naturally. That's a great attitude, and they will come out more naturally with practice and input, so that's a great attitude to have, and thank you very much, Kris. Elliott on vocab unlocked for T, which means stairs or ladder. I love how so many of the compound words make total sense. Here, an elevator is electric ladder, 电梯, and stairs are building ladder. Oh, 楼梯, yeah. So it's like, what? Yeah, 楼梯, yeah, building ladder. Perfection and simplicity. Yeah, they really do have a lot. Not always, of course, but vast majority of the situations. Even if you can't see the pattern, there's a pattern there which you just don't have enough understanding of the characters involved in order to see that understanding. But it's almost always incredibly logical and intuitive when it comes to Chinese compound words, and it is very satisfying. Even today, I'm like, there's a new word. Of course it means that. It's great. Another one from Kris here on tones. He says, this is very intriguing. I've learned about 600 words over the past few months using other methods, but I'm at the point described in the video at 4:24 where I can remember the pinyin spelling, but not necessarily the tones. Yes, and that will be solved. So currently Kris is in the pronunciation course, but once he starts learning characters using our method, he'll be mapping out the tones of every character, or at least one pronunciation of a character. Many characters have different pronunciations, but he'll have a solid grounding, at least one pronunciation, so that tone will be almost unforgettable. And we've had people that have been like HSK 5 passes or HSK 6 passes, where they've started our method and gone through the whole thing anyway and relearned all those characters, and it's vastly improved their tones because they're all visually sort of tied to a personal location that they've lived in or been in. So you've got that to look forward to as well. Next, Doug Casey on another pronunciation mastery lesson for YUAN and YUN. I'm finding YUAN particularly difficult. Often the native recordings sound to my ear more like they have an ah as in cat rather than as in 10. Does this particular final tend to be inconsistent? That's tough to say. I would say that YUAN, I guess some people would maybe say it more like YUAN, but not that much like so it's maybe a slightly more than but standard Mandarin pronunciation is YUAN. And just on a side note as well, I saw a comment about us. I just stumbled upon it about our course where someone was like, "Oh, Mandarin Blueprint teaches yun as what I just did, yun with a yun like that." And he said, "But they don't say it like that. That's not how you actually pronounce it in real life." And I actually said the exact same thing when I had a teacher teach me that sound. She was like yun, and I was like, yun? No one says that. But what she was doing and what I'm doing in the pronunciation mastery course is teaching you the mechanics of that sound. And the mechanics of that sound, the actual physical thing you do with your mouth, is yun. Now, it doesn't, of course, native speakers don't say, "Oh, look at the yun today. They look very nice." But teaching that the mechanics of that process and that pronunciation allows you to say it properly. Yun. It's actually much more subtle. It's not yun. It's yun. Kan yun. Because it's a sound that does not exist in English. So the only way to teach it is to sort of over-exaggerate the mechanics of it, and then you can sort of develop subtlety as you grasp the concept. So it's a very I remember actually like laughing at this teacher trying to teach me. I was like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. My pronunciation is great, and I could pronounce it correctly, but she was right to teach it that way. So anyway, it's just a side note, just related to this lesson. So I thought I'd just put that in there for you. Next is Matt Shubert, and he says, "I have a small tone question. I'm still getting used to the usage of 下来 in 拍照下来好看一点." So have a good look at this sentence. This is more for the more advanced listeners or watchers of this. He says, in pleco, still don't know how to say it, it specifically calls out the verb plus 下来. So for example, formula including finality or completion. So for example, 拍下来. So if you're taking pictures, 拍 is the verb to take a picture. So 我把这个照片拍下来. So it means to take a picture and it being completed. So once I've completed the taking of the picture, then I can do something else. 拍下来了之后会做别的事情了. Yeah, so 拍下来. So that's what he's seeing when he's looking at this pattern. But actually he's seeing the wrong thing, but it's very understandable. Let's continue. It says, as both characters being fifth tone. Yeah, so in that example, yes, 拍下来. 下来 is both fifth tone, very short. Just that's basically a fifth tone, just incredibly short. It could be high, it could be low, but short. Is that correct here? So spoken, it would come out sort of quickly, like 拍照下来 as just one phrase. Fourth. It'd be first, fourth, fifth. Meaning the picture will come out looking better. So he's actually confused about the patterns here. So when you use the 下来 with the double fifth tone, meaning completing, as he's assuming is here, it's only used with single character verbs, I believe. But it's regardless of whether that's true or not, that's the feeling I have. I haven't confirmed that, but it's certainly not used in this case. What this sentence is, so let's have a look at the sentence again. 拍照下来好看一点. Right, so 拍照. So what this is actually doing, this is a conditional statement. This is saying, 如果你下来拍照, so that if you come down to take the picture, it will look better. Okay, but it's a more advanced and very colloquial, very sort of natural way of using the 如果, like basically if in a sentence, where it just cuts out the 如果. It's just assumed that's what is being said. It's very advanced. I wouldn't recommend that you try and just try this without looking at a few more sentences, but you can basically 拍照下来. So like 拍照 is basically just saying, in the context of taking a picture, 下来好看一点. So if you came down, so 下来, so with the fourth tone, fifth tone, not double fifth tone. 下来 as in you're up there, come down here. 下来会好看一点. So this is a very common thing in Chinese where you set the scene of what you're talking about with the first word, and then you describe afterwards. So for example, 他说话说得很好. So if you just say 他说得很好, then that's also okay. But very common in Chinese, you'll have 他说话说得很好. So they double it. So it's like 他说话. So that 他说话 is like setting the scene of the subject of what you're about to say. So it's just something to look out for. Again, only more advanced learners would really kind of get what I'm talking about right now. But it's just something to look out for. It's not something you'll immediately be able to do after hearing me explain it, but it's just hopefully hearing me explain it will be able to help you notice it in the future. So Matt, Matt was mistaken, but it's a sign that Matt is really switched on and he's on the ball when it comes to these sentences. He's noticing these little patterns. He's like, what's going on with this? And that's very promising. That means he's going to do really well with this language. Next is Rick on door. I just thought I'd put this in because this is just a cool little rather common phrase that not very many people hear or see or use, learners I mean. So 每天都比我吃的多得多，多得多. So let's look at that 吃的多得多. So 多得多 is a complement to 吃的. But what's happening with 多得多? So basically, if you just say 吃得多, that means eat more than me. So let's just look at the sentence again, break it down. 每天 every day 都比我吃的多得多. So every day, like he eats more than me. But 多得多 is like a lot more than me. So if you just said 每天都比我吃得多, that's just literally saying he eats more than me every day, or every day he eats more than me. But if you say 每天都比我吃得多得多, it's like 多得多. It's just a way of saying like loads more than me. And this could be used with there's all sorts of other verbs and adjectives, just anything that goes with more, basically. So for example, 他比我帅得多得多. He's way more handsome than me. Or 他的成绩比我差得多得多. So his 成绩 is like his performance at school is way worse than mine, So there's all sorts of different ways you can use it. Just thought I'd add that in there. Go ahead and try that out, guys. Okay, so that's all of the emails and comments we've had this week. Had a lot of great ones this week. Thanks for those. Let's move on to the vocab living links. So the first one here is from, basically, if you're not sure what these are just sections of our course. So this is how we teach you vocabulary, compound words. We create mnemonics in all different kinds of ways to learn compound words quickly. So let's show you what we mean here. Alfred Hong on Vocab Unlocked for 周 as in 周末, so weekend. And he just says, The Weeknd, the band, performing on Saturday Night Live. So that's a great example of using a personal experience. And of course, you can just put a note. But it's always good to put an image. And I'm sure, because that's on Saturday Night Live, you'd be able to almost definitely find a great screenshot of that just using a quick Google image search. Put that in your flashcards and off you go. So that's a great one. Thank you very much for that, Alfred. Another one from Alfred on Vocab Unlocked for 注, 记住, which means to commit to memory and to remember, not just to remember. When I say to remember, obviously people always confuse it with as in like, oh, now I remember, which is 想起来, 我想起来, as in like I had it in my brain and now I've recalled it. But 记住 is the process of putting it in your brain, to commit to memory. And he just says Anki flashcards. So yeah, I think that would work very well. That's kind of very meta as well. Like how do you just getting a picture of, maybe you just get the Anki logo or something. But yeah, that would work well. Well done, Alfred. Next is movies. So this is how we learn characters with our method. and we have lots of good examples this week from people. Let's jump into it. Hank Elliott, make a movie for door, which is the measure word for ear. Sorry, it's not the measure word for ear. It's the measure word for flowers, and it's part of the word ear, arador. So sorry about that. So we've basically we've chosen the keyword earlobe for it. So Hank says, Darth Vader, DU actor, is in my grandparents' sleeping porch, the null set, and bedroom. He's sitting at a little school desk. That's the prop. That would be the top little coffee table, 几, 茶几的几, that I grew up using. Again, personal, brilliant. So he's got not just any desk, but a personal desk that he grew up using. Learning a new way to use the force. He is making a tree prop, that's the prop below, grow by pulling on his earlobe. The more he yanks on his earlobe, the higher the tree grows. That's really good. Very simple as well. He's just sitting there concentrating, and then you see the tree growing. He's like, that's just great. It's very visual. I couldn't think of any ways to improve that. Of course, you guys can go ahead and add some special effects to it, but that's very intuitive to me. Well done, Hank. Next is Will Raley, make a movie for 嘴, which means mouth. Literally your mouth orifice, not like coal, which can also be other stuff. 嘴 is specifically mouth. Number 1, Dr. Zoidberg. I haven't watched Futurama in a long time, so that takes me back. At EI's living room, Zoidberg is playing with the unicorn. That's the jiao, the horn part. Zoidberg is making the unicorn run towards wherever he points his laser pen. That's great. The mouth walks in, and Zoidberg accidentally points the laser pen into the mouth's orifice. The unicorn follows the laser pen and jumps right into the mouth's orifice. The mouth does not look very happy at Zoidberg now that the mouth has a unicorn sticking out of its orifice. So well done. That's really good. Of course, it's kind of tough because you have the mouth prop, and the meaning is also mouth orifice. So, but I think you've focused on that idea of mouth so much during the scene that it's going to be very, very clear. No worries whatsoever. So well done. Next is Rick on O, as in Ojo, as in Europe. Jackie Chan is outside the entrance first tone of the OU set. He was surprised when a courier delivered a huge box from his boss. What could it be? When he opened the box, there was a brand new red lawnmower inside. What a real surprise. He was very happy. Great emotion coming in. But then he was more surprised when he saw that the bill was already pre-charged to his credit card, and the whole box came all the way from Europe. Oh, okay, very good. So one thing about that scene is that there's not much visual reference to Europe, which is the key word, right? There's like a bill where he's like, it's very expensive, but it could be gui, right? It could be the meaning of gui, right? Which means expensive. So I would have the courier is from Europe. He is dressed in whatever you personally consider to be the most typically European dress, like some sort of get-up that he has on. So I'm thinking the Buckingham Palace soldiers, that's very British, which is also Europe, I guess. And but for me, because I'm British, so I consider Europe more like, I don't know, Sweden or something like that, Switzerland, this sort of thing. I hope those are actually in Europe. I'm not embarrassing myself. But someone in like clogs or something like that. That's how I personally imagine that. But everyone will imagine that differently depending on where you're from and your upbringing. Okay, so that's just something that I would add in as a very important detail, and also make him notice that he actually recognizes it as a detail in the pro. He reacts to their clothing. That's very important. It solidifies the details if you have people react to it. So well done, Rick. Another one here from Rick. Make a movie liao, which means to cure with medicine, usually. So Li, actress, complains of an unexplained sickness, and she goes to see a doctor, which is the Bing, the sickness component, who holds a clinic in the kitchen second tone of the AO set. After consulting the doctor about her sickness, the doctor quietly reaches for a dark crimson hatchet hanging on the kitchen wall. Upon seeing the scary hatchet, Lee actress suddenly jumps and exclaims that she is cured miraculously. Her sickness is gone already, and she she hurries out of the kitchen. Just like that, Dr. Hatchet can heal. Very funny. And humor is also really good. So, of course, I always like to show, even though that's really funny, your brain might forget that joke like 6 months down the line. And you might be looking at that scene in your mind thinking, what's the meaning of this again? Like, I see a doctor, I see a scared woman, like, but where's the healing? So I often like to just be a bit more obvious visually with my keyword descriptions. I mean, it's very likely this is so funny and quirky that it would be no problem at all. But I like to just play it safe by actually showing some sort of healing. So maybe she's got like a big boil or something like that, and he like hits it with the hatchet or something like that, and she's actually like, she's gone from in pain to actually relieved and happy. I would always do that just because I don't want to go back and have to recreate my scenes if I don't, if I can avoid it. But still, always love the humor and the quirkiness from Rick's scenes. They're great. Luke on Make a Movie for Anne. Jackie Chan is outside the entrance to my dormitory in Japan. He's dressed as a chimney sweep and he's excited to help out with the job he's been given with the dorm's chimney smoking quite badly. Salma Hayek then comes out to meet up with Chan and shakes his hand, to which she feels more at ease shaking hands with a chimney sweep. That's great. And you can show that as well. Again, show that visually. I feel more at ease. Like, show that. And I'm sure you do, but just saying it's very important. Well done, Luke. Yeah. So she was like very stressed out. That's that contrast idea. So she's very stressed out and then not stressed out, at ease. And we've got one more here today from Nick Sims, who's always giving us really interesting scenes. Thanks a lot, Nick. Tina Turner, this is for Tiao, by the way, Tiao, which means, it could mean a few different things, but it's a measure word for stick-like objects, a sort of long, thin objects. Tina Turner, the TI, is in a cafe at Lifetime Fitness looking for a smoothie at the bar, when to her surprise, a sloth, that's the top component, is there serving. The sloth lays out 3 choices for an olive smoothie. That's the bottom prop, I assume. Strip 1, green olives with a twig branch. Strip 2, black olives with a twig branch. And strip 3, no olive, just a twig branch. Pick one. Great, using the keyword very well there, using all the props. And you don't really need much more than that. So like keeping it simple. Nick always is good for that, keeping it simple, and often adds a little bit of weirdness and funniness in there as well to sort of make it a bit more memorable. So thanks a lot, Nick. Well done. And I think we'll leave it there for today. So thank you very much again for all those comments. I was really blown away by them this week. And I look forward to the next podcast. See you in a couple of weeks, guys. Bye-bye.